Hi, so this will be a more informal video, just talking about the American election from a European perspective. Most of my videos are more scripted, so you should sub if you want to see some more of that stuff. But anyway, on to the main topic. So, I don't think it's controversial to say that Joe Biden taking over the White House is probably a good thing for Europe. I don't think it's very interesting to say either because it's so obvious, so that's not what this video is about. Biden will bring some level of normalcy to EU-US trade relations, but the thing is, Trump made an impression on America. It really does seem that Trump was different from other politicians. He left a scar in America in a way that other Republicans like George Bush or Ronald Reagan didn't. And I'm not saying that those guys weren't bad. And I'm not saying that Democratic presidents haven't been bad either. They've all done some pretty messed up stuff in the Middle East, but I'm gonna be honest, the Middle East isn't my forte. Honestly, I don't really have a forte, I just have a microphone and an internet connection. Anyway, speaking of internet connections, the internet probably does have a big thing to do with the rise of Trumpism. And it's a big reason why it's not going anywhere. People are going to get sucked into these cultish online groups where they can keep the Trump dream alive, and they'll be assured that no, it's not weird that they're still into Trump, and it's not completely undemocratic and ridiculous that you want to vote for a one-term president's children for the next 40 years. It's actually based and MAGA-pilled, and the fact that half of your friends don't want to speak to you anymore isn't your fault, and it's their fault for being too sensitive, and God, I wish Cheryl hadn't taken the kids. Trump had his whole America First thing. And he talked about pulling out of NATO, he pulled out of trade talks with various countries, he undid the Iranian nuclear deal, yada yada yada, and look, a lot of this stuff he didn't end up actually doing. The US is still in NATO, and they still need access to the markets of other countries to trade. The US strongman strategy never really happened. It never really got past strongman rhetoric, at least in terms of foreign policy towards the EU. The thing is though, Trump was never a guy who cared about policy or about results, because those two things don't get people to like you. You don't win based on policy or results, you just gotta make people think you've got those things. So, in the end, a lot of this Trump stuff never materialized. But people did vote for it. 62 million people in 2016 and 72 million people in 2020. These people aren't going anywhere. Well, they are going to Twitter to complain, but you get my point. Another thing I should mention is that while Trump lost the 2020 election, he's still incredibly popular with Republicans. 93% of registered Republicans voted for Trump in 2020, which is actually more than in 2016. He actually got more popular during his time in office. For contrast, Democrats voted for both Clinton and Biden in around the same numbers as Republicans voted for Trump. But Biden and Clinton were both pretty standard Democrats, whereas Trump is kind of a new leaf for Republicans, at least in terms of rhetoric. It used to be that the idea of being world police was really popular with Americans, but now it looks like the Republicans would rather be the world's bullies. So, in 2024, who do you think the Republicans are going to run? Another George Bush type neocon, or another Trump-style, let's say, nationalist? The Republicans have already realized that right-wing populism is what gets them elected. That's what gets people energized and excited and making those long-winded, poorly sourced rants while wearing sunglasses indoors. Anyway, my point is that Biden does not necessarily signal a return to normalcy for EU-US relations. Prior to Trump, we could more or less expect similar foreign policy out of Americans, whether it was Republican or Democrat. They wanted free trade, and hey, that works for us in Europe in general. There's a lot of caveats to that point, but you see what I'm saying. The guy who comes after Biden might be another neoliberal, or social liberal, or normal person, but that's not guaranteed. He might as well just be another guy who sees the EU as a hostile organization. Certainly, the appetite is there in America for another Trump-style demagogue. And next time, he's going to have more help in the American legislature rather than being a lone wolf type unhinged psycho. I can't remember her name, but I know there's one QAnoner who got elected to the American Senate recently. And anyway, the next Trump-style president might actually be good at their job. The next guy might actually succeed in pulling out of NATO or reducing EU-US trade and cooperation. No matter how bad the results would be for both parties, it's entirely possible. After all, results don't matter. What really matters is posting pictures of eagles and American flags on Facebook while tucking into your 7th beer of the afternoon. That's kind of the main point. Biden might very well just be a lull in the downward spiral of EU-US relations. Of course, that might also turn out to be untrue, but at the moment, I would say it would probably be a pretty bad idea to be relying on the US for a whole lot in the future. What's the solution? Well, it's hard to predict what would work and what wouldn't. I can only really make guesses about ideas that might work. One thing that I definitely don't think will work is turning inward. Individual European nations will never be able to stand up to America, not to mention China and Russia. Trying to stand alone while trying to broker deals with larger powers just makes you vulnerable to trade deals and agreements that might not really work in your favor. I mean, hell, look at the UK and how the US is trying to force them to start buying their weird chlorinated chickens. They don't really have a choice. No, in a world where we can't rely on the US, we need the EU and we need it to be strong. And obviously, we need to be less reliant on the US. I'm someone who's not really a fan of militarism, but we might need to increase our defense budgets in case the US ever do decide to leave NATO. Russia has been looking pretty hawkish these past few years. It would be a bad decision on their part to leave NATO because they would lose so much influence, but we can't rely on the US being rational anymore. Economies are far trickier things to make predictions and recommendations for. To an extent, America will always need Europe in the same way that Europe needs America. They're a massive market for trade. They've got massive middle classes who all want to buy consumer goods. But it might be a good idea to invest in the growing middle classes of developing nations, hopefully in a less predatory way than China is doing in Africa. These middle classes are growing far faster than middle classes in America and Europe because they're just now starting to industrialize, and they're industrializing far faster than Europe and America industrialize because we already have this technology, and they're being given a leg up by China and hopefully Europe as well. This would help the EU establish goodwill and larger markets to trade in. It also, of course, has the benefit of helping developing nations along too, which is a good thing, but not normally taken into account in politics. The point is, America can't really be relied on anymore, and the EU should take a more proactive role in developing its own future. Thank you for watching, I hope you enjoyed. Give me a like and comment if you can. It helps appease the algorithm gods, and I'm very thankful for each of them. See you in the next video.